We would like to welcome all of our attendees to our very first session of What Can I Be with a PhD? This is a brand new series that we're doing with the EYCN. And in this series, we are hopefully going to look at the wide variety of careers and how your life can change after you get a PhD. A little bit of housekeeping to start off with. We have a Q&A tab down the bottom. So any questions that you'd like to ask, just chuck them in there and Fabian will get to them in the Q&A session. So there's no point in me explaining who this person is because they will be doing it themselves. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass it over to Fernando, who's going to tell us about his exciting chemistry career.
Thank you so much, Coleman and Fabian, for organizing this. I didn't know it was the first. That's amazing. I'm so happy and so glad to be contributing to this brand new series. As you may have seen, there's a cat that wants to be part of the series as well. This was not planned by a kind of, anyway, they'll be around probably, or maybe not, who knows. I'm going to try to share the presentation and then I'm going to go ahead with that because I think the most useful thing about these presentations is that we get time to chat afterwards and have questions. So I believe the Q&A button down there is going to be open throughout the webinar. So feel free to drop your questions there. So that's, let me try to share and start and stop talking about technicalities. So there you go. Hopefully you'll be seeing the presentation right now. If you don't, just let me know. So like Com has said, my name is Fernando. I'm a science communicator, and basically they asked me to talk about the different uses of a PhD. So I'm going to try to talk to you about my experience, what I've done with my PhD, and what I do right now as a science communicator. And hopefully you'll get some insightful advice from these slides and this talk. And yeah, if you have any questions, again, feel free to drop them in the chat. Now I'm sharing screen, so I won't be able to see that, but hopefully at the end we'll have time to discuss about this. So first off, I wanted to start thanking EYCN for inviting me to this webinar series. It's a tremendous pleasure for me to collaborate with EYCN. For those of you who don't know it, I was the EYCN chair for a couple of years between 2015 and 2017. So it's a great pleasure to stay in touch with EYCN, and it's an even bigger pleasure to be able to contribute with some interesting content, hopefully. So let me just start with the presentation, and you know, I had to start with a GIF because apparently that's what millennials do. Maybe some of you in the audience already consider this outdated, but anyway, yeah. So let's start with something simpler and forget about the GIF. Because normally when you think about a career, and this is something I see very often when I receive CVs, or when you look at a LinkedIn profile, or when you talk to people, they tell you, hey, I worked at this place, and then I did this, and then I did that. Even if you go to like Twitter bios, again, Twitter, very millennial, but anyway, if you go to a Twitter bio, you'll see, you know, ex-editor-in-chief of this, and now do this. And it's like, yeah, that's great, but life and career is very rarely aligned, and it's actually a bit of a mess. And that's kind of been the case for me. So it's never a straight path. It's always a bunch of things and a bunch of experiences and a bunch of activities and learnings you get from different places that eventually help you shape who you are as a person, who you are as a professional. And this is very important because, like, believe it or not, I get a message asking me about how to become a science communicator, how to get into science communication quite often. I don't go as far as saying once a month, but quite frequently I get someone asking about the career in science communication and how did I get there. And the truth is that it's not a straight path. Actually, I started working in science communication without any formal training in the field. I hadn't even finished my PhD when I started working. So I did my Viva after I had started working. So this slide with the, you know, taking a year off, changing program, work part-time, it's pretty much me, because it's been a little bit of chaos. But it serves as an example of what I think it's a very important message, which is that life is not a line. It's actually sort of a combination of different lines. I know this looks like a metro, like an underground map, and it's actually the intention, but it's to represent that you can actually see your life as different lines, not only your work line, but also, for example, you could look at the places you've lived in. In my case, I've been most of my life in Zaragoza, which is my hometown in Spain. Spent a little while in France, in Paris, and then in Tarragona. And since 5 years ago, I live in Cambridge in the UK, which I guess now 5 years means that I'm entitled to stay in the UK or something like that, which is great and sad at the same time because Brexit is not the best idea ever. Anyway, not politics here. So you could talk about places you've lived in. You could talk about works and work experience that you've had. So in my case, this is a summary that kind of talks about where I've worked. I did a couple of internships at a place called the Institute of Material Science of Aragon, which is my region in Spain. Then I did a few science communication contracts with my university, the University of Zaragoza. And then I started my PhD in a place that I'm not going to pronounce in English or in Spanish because it's a mess of letters that looks like a, I don't know, drunken monkey pushed the keyboard and came up with those IFQ, whatever. But I did my PhD in there, which was a new research institute created in my city to do catalysis and synthesis. So I did my PhD in organic chemistry. And then I did an internship at the RSC, the Royal Society of Chemistry, which kind of got me interested into working in science communication. I started seeing the opportunities in that field. I then went to EYCN. For those of you who don't know, EYCN is one of the biggest and most famous research institutes in chemistry in Catalonia, in Spain. So there I was the press officer for almost 2 years. And after that, I moved to the University of Cambridge to work for the graphene flagship, which I don't know, I think still running. It's a big project funded by the European Commission to do research on graphene. And basically there, I did also the press office communications officer job. So basically translating what they did to press releases, web materials, talking to journalists and trying to get the project out there. But again, the career line and the places you've lived in career lines, like it's just two ways of seeing your life. I don't know how many of you in the audience, because actually I've seen we've got quite a lot of people, but how many of you actually are involved in EYCN. But I really like to kind of highlight the volunteering activities as a great part of your career and as a great part of being part of a community and growing your profile. So I was in the student chapter at university. I was in the Spanish Society of Chemistry. I was the chair of EYCN for a couple of years, and before that I was the Spanish delegate. And I was also a little bit involved in the formation of EYCN, which is the International Younger Chemist Network. So this is also something that will shape your career, and you don't have to think about, okay, my PhD and my research is gonna define my whole career, because actually it may be that some of the things you do on the side, like in my case was like science communication and science outreach. It may be that some of the things you do on the side, like EYCN volunteering, that could actually be the thing that shapes your future and makes you go into science policy, or makes you go into working in a society, or makes you go into working in editorial, like Wiley. I know a bunch of people from EYCN and beyond that end up working as a journal editor. So the things you do on the side, it's also they're also shaping your brain or your experience, and it's also interesting to learn from all the experiences you get throughout. So kind of think of life as a combination of different paths. You've got your career, your education, your personal life too, because that obviously shapes what you do and where you do it and when you do it, because there's times you need to take some time off because of an illness, or because you, I don't know, you have a kid, things like that. So your personal life, it's also something that shapes your career. And eventually all these things end up connected in ways that you don't realize until you're a bit older, and until you actually, start thinking about the connections that led you to where you are. I mean, for example, like when I started doing EYCN volunteering, I didn't even realize how important that was going to be in my life. But then it was actually through EYCN connections that I found my first house, my first flat when I moved to Cambridge. So you never know how the personal and volunteering and career lines are going to connect. And I really like, I mean, some of the EYCN people already know that I'm a little bit of an Apple nerd fanboy, but this quote by Steve Jobs is brilliant, because he did say this in I don't know if it was a commencement or like a whatever speech at a university, in one of these big American graduations. They invited him and he said, you cannot connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect the dots looking backwards. So you have to trust the dots, and you have to trust that the dots will somehow connect in your future. So this is what I was trying to convey with the Metro Line thingy, is that the connections won't be, there when you look at them. They will appear throughout your life and throughout time. So just keep doing what you're doing, and I'm sure that eventually you will find your way, you will find your path. And I know this is kind of easy to say from a position of like privilege, because I'm a white male from a very privileged background, because I come from Spain, which is like a developed country. But it's always good to try new things, and sometimes take a little bit of a time off and risk if you want to do an internship, but you're not sure if it's gonna be your passion or your dream job or whatever. But if you can afford it and you really want to go for it, I would advise to go for it. Again, I know I say this from a position of privilege, but if you can risk a little bit and go ahead and try new things, it's always a good way of getting a taste or a flavor of different career paths and different options. And a lot of companies have this option to do internships, and it's a good way to see if what you do is your passion and you don't mind doing it for a long time. And then also don't be afraid of changing paths. There's a lot of people that change paths in careers along the way, and that is actually an option too. And I'm sure this is going to get repeated and repeated over the series of webinars that EYCN is organizing. But actually, if you look at the data, academia is the alternative. Stop calling everybody who does other things the alternative or non-traditional careers, because it's sort of wrong. And for that, I mean, again, I've got the good news everyone gives, because it's good news for most of us. Like, if you feel like academia is not your place, it's because it may not be your place. Actually, very few people stay in academia if you look at the data. And this is a great article by EYCN and EYCN friend Natalie LaFranco. If you go and check it out, it's free on Chemical Engineering News. I can share this later so you have the links, and they're actually like clickable and whatever. But this looks at the people in the Young Chemist Committee in ACS, which is like the EYCN of ACS. And in the first years after the graduation of the PhD graduation, only 17% were in academia. And that's, again, the younger chemists. So of course, a lot of them are doing postdocs. If you look at the figures further down the line, further like down graduation, you see that this figure is even smaller. So don't think about academia and professorships and tenure tracks as the way to go. Think of them as an option, like as another option. It's great if you love them. It's fantastic if you stay, but there's plenty of other things to do with your PhD besides staying in academia as a professor. And actually, your PhD is useful. You may think that doing a PhD on something like, I don't know, boron nickel complexes that catalyze one only single reaction that nobody's going to use in their lives is useless. But it's actually useful beyond the boron and beyond the catalysis. It's useful because the skills you acquire during your PhD are very transferable. So you learn how to solve problems, you learn how to be very resilient, because some of those problems often don't have a very evident solution, so you need to be working on them for a long time. You learn how to be motivated, you learn how to look at literature, you learn how to go to conferences and communicate your results. It's really great training. So use your PhD as a time to develop your skills. Be aware of the skills you're developing, even things you do on routine, like, I don't know, maybe buying supplies for your lab. That's amazing management skill that you may apply in further jobs, later on. Build your network, organize activities, volunteer in things if you can, organize conferences, participate in these kind of things, because this is the sort of things that the employers are going to look after later on. And I mean, if you're in this webinar, you're probably doing it already, but try to find out what else is out of academia. Don't think of professorships as the only option. Try to talk to people outside university and see what they do. And chemistry and science PhD degrees in general are very, very, very sought after by many, many people. Again, I feel like all of this is very generic, so except for the lines at the beginning, but I don't know if you want to learn a little bit more about my career as a science communicator, because I think that's what was kind of advertised, like the option to work in science communication. So like I said before, like these are my three main experiences as an official science communicator. Like I got a salary from these places. So I first worked in Chemistry World, which I hope you know, it's a monthly magazine by the Royal Society of Chemistry here in Cambridge. So I did an internship for them, and luckily enough, after that, I kept on freelancing for them. Actually, after this meeting is over, I should probably finish an article that is due tomorrow. So I did science writing for them, but when I was an intern, I also did some of their podcasts, and I helped with like some of the videos they did. So it was a great experience, especially because if you cannot tell from my accent, English is not my first language. So it gave me a lot of experience in learning how to write properly in English, how to get my texts edited, how to organize news stories, which was very useful for the next step, which was, again, like I said, EYCN in Spain. And there I was the person responsible for comms and press. So basically any paper that came out of EYCN, I tried to put together a press release in English and in Spanish, and sometimes in Catalan, which is a different skill set altogether, to try to convey the news to journalists and people that should be interested in covering why that Nature Chemistry paper doing nickel catalysis on this, metathesis reaction was interesting for the wider public. So that was quite a challenge, but it also allowed me to expand my network in Spain and to make very good friends. And it also gave me the opportunity to train further in science communication, because I got to do sort of a master's degree while I was working at EYCN. So every Friday evening, I'd go to Barcelona and take classes. And then after that, came to Cambridge to work for the flagship. I already said this is like a 10-year huge project by the European Commission, and my job was basically the same as in EYCN. So putting together press releases, talking to journalists, with the tremendous luck that we had a very, very big communication team. We had 2 people, 3 at sometimes here in Cambridge, and then 4 people in Sweden, in Gothenburg, doing marketing, doing events, doing science writing on top of my communications and press. So it was a very, very big team for a very, very big project, and that also expanded my abilities to work with other people, with other teams, with other universities. I traveled a lot. I met a bunch of people, and I also learned other things like doing international trade shows, international fairs, things like Mobile World Congress. We had a booth from the flagship that was amazing experience. But like I said before, don't look at the things as a line, or like I did this and then in 2016 I did this, and then in 2018 I did this. also look at the things that happen in between. Before Chemistry World, I had been volunteering for Pint of Science in my hometown. Believe it or not, the guy on the right, that's me, with like, I don't know, 10 years younger than now. Anyway, I also did some TV shows in my home region in Aragon. Like you can see the things in the between the two circles. I've also participated in online conferences. I've also worked for other magazines besides Chemistry World, like, for example, Chemical Engineering News, which is the equivalent to Chemistry World in the ACS, in the American Chemical Society. For the past few years, I've been working for IUPAC, writing about chemical technologies for them. Every year, we release an article on what IUPAC considers the chemical technologies with more potential in the landscape of industry and innovation. And yeah, I mean, so it's all a matter of like not looking only at one path and actually looking at everything as a whole, and then that will give you the idea of the things you're actually good at and the things you enjoy most, and the things you can actually work at that really make you happy. Like in my case is science communication. I'm talking about science. Of course, Chem Chicken had to make an appearance in here, so Chem Chicken is somewhere in the slide. If you don't follow Chem Chicken, the official EYCN mascot on Twitter, you should do that now. I know Twitter is outdated. Maybe we should do like a Chem Chicken TikTok or something. Anyway, what about my career part two? For those of you who are interested in science communication, I always like to include this slide that basically gives you an idea that science communication is not one job. There's actually many different specialties. The same way in chemistry, you have organic chemistry, inorganic chemistry, analytical chemistry, organometallic chemistry, theoretical chemistry. In science communication, you've got different things that you can do. You could do science journalism, which would be reporting on papers in a critical manner and asking experts and contrasting and fact-checking the information. You could do public relations and comms, which is what I did for ICIQ on the flagship, which is basically promoting the science done in a research project or a research center. In that case, you are of course trying to be objective and true to the actual science, but you're always trying to lift up the institute of the project. So you're always going to say, you know, the graphing flagship is great because of this and that, and then it's the job of the journalist to fact check that. Outreach and public education. You can also work in things like doing experiments for kids or doing experiments for the wider public, and teaching why chemistry, why science is important. You could work as a science influencer. There's many people that only do work on social media, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, and the whole time is being there talking about science with their audience, and that's amazing because it's really time consuming, and it's really, really great the job that science influencers do. You could also work in science policy, and it's also a part of science communication. You need to, I think it's the hardest science communication because you need to talk to politicians about science, and that's like, okay, that's a big barrier that you need to. Anyway, so there's many different things you can do in science communication. So if you're interested, that webpage there, again, you'll get the slides. So you can click on there, and it's basically a little Notion page that I've put together with other people that work in the field. So you can go and check out where to get more training, where to get more free courses, where to get books on science communication if you're interested in potentially starting a career in that field. And I always like this. Oh, it's not moving. Well, there you go. SpongeBob is moving now. Anyway, so yeah, this is basically me every day, because eventually for me, science communication is doing documentation, doing translating, doing writing, a lot of writing, doing infographics and social media. I don't do that much illustration, but I know people that do illustration, so sometimes we collaborate, doing TV. So it's a lot of things. And eventually there's even research on science communication, which is really important to know how to do communication in a way that makes sense and it's actually useful. And then just because I really want to go to the debate to talk to you, I just had like a couple of slides because there was a tiny dot in the career path that I didn't explain. And this is just because like very recently, I set up a little company called Agatha, which is a company specialized in doing science communication. So we're based both here in the UK and in Spain. And what we do is we provide communication services of all sorts to researchers throughout the world. And one of the most, like the biggest things we do at the moment is we are partners in EU funded grants. So projects funded by the European Commission. So for these projects, now we're partners in two, one called ANML, another one called Impactive. So in these projects, we carry out things like producing the web page, going to events. ANML is actually organizing an event in Brussels in 3 weeks, which is driving me kind of crazy. This being recorded, I shouldn't have said that. Anyway, so we do all the comms activities for this, and then we also do tinier comms actions for other researchers. We do videos, we do journal covers, we do things like writing press releases for other people. So it's been a great challenge. And again, I don't think I would have been able to do any of this without all the experience that comes from before. So again, I should have the quote by Steve Jobs again here. You won't be able to connect the dots until very late, but eventually the dots will connect, and a PhD is really useful, even though it can be really tough at moments. I think it's a great experience. You learn a lot, and yeah, again, I will share the slides with the organizer, and they can pass them on to everybody who registered. But if you have any questions, you can either use the time that we have now, or you can drop me an email to that address in there, or you can, again, very millennial, go to Twitter and find me and send me a DM. Everything's open, so you can do that and talk to me. I try to respond to almost everything, and if I don't, I apologize. Feel free to text me, and I'll try to respond. Again, thank you so much to EYCN for inviting me. It's been a great pleasure to kick off this series of events, and I hope everybody sees that a PhD is way more than just a title and book that you produce on a topic. It's actually a valuable experience for you to find jobs later on. So yeah, I'm gonna stop sharing, and then we can move to the Q&A. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Fernando. Muchas gracias for the inspiring talk, and also pointing out a lot of facets about science comm. Also maybe pointing out that academia is the alternative.